There are so many different dog foods to choose from these days, though have you ever wondered what people fed their dogs 100 years ago or maybe 150 years ago? Dog food was actually invented about 150 years ago. So back then, people didn't go to the store to buy something called dog food. So what did they feed their dogs back then? Some scientists believe that dogs and humans have lived together on this earth for more than 30,000 years. So for the great majority of our existence together, there was no such thing as dog food. Even so, today we're told that dogs should only eat dog food. But does that make sense? Does it make sense that this relatively new invention is actually the healthiest for our dogs? Have dog food manufacturers actually been able to create something better? Or has the multi-billion-dollar pet food industry found ways to lure us away from what's actually more natural and healthy? Hi, I'm Ingunn, the Norwegian Viking behind Viking Dog Girl. I hold a certificate as a pet food nutrition specialist, and I'm here every week sharing all things dog. Dog nutrition, dog health, dog lifestyle. And I do it the Viking way, which means no sugarcoating and no BS. I go to find the truth and I give it to you so that you can help your dog be as healthy, happy, and live as long as possible. So, what did dogs eat before the invention of dog food? Well, table scraps, leftovers, butcher excess. It would really depend on what was actually available, and of course what would make sense for a dog to eat. At least it would make sense to focus on meat, seeing as dogs are carnivores, and they find meat the most tasty as well. However, dogs are also highly adaptable and can survive on a lot of different kinds of food. That doesn't mean it's the best thing for them, though it may be enough for a while. The thing is, there was no specific diet for dogs, and there were no nutrient requirements either, at least not the way we know it today. There were no one there to actually say whether or not a diet was complete and balanced, which is in stark contrast to what we're told today. Today, we're told to only feed dog food to our dogs because dog food is complete and balanced. If you feed your dog anything else, then you risk your dog's diet being unbalanced and incomplete. We all want our dogs to have the best possible diet, right? Especially because we know a dog's diet can have a huge direct impact on their health. So it makes a lot of sense to feed dog food when we're told that feeding anything else could put our dogs at risk of an unbalanced and incomplete diet, don't you think? But does that even make sense? I mean, let's look at what dog food, the kind of dog food that we're told is the only thing our dogs should be eating. Let's look at what that actually consists of. Well, there's a lot to be said about dog food in general, though let's just summarize in a few main points. For one, most dog food is highly processed. Even the ingredients themselves may be highly processed before added to the mixture. Plus, a lot of ingredients in dog foods make no sense for a dog to even consume. There may be harmful synthetic additives and even synthetic nutrients. Actually, a lot of the nutrients that our dogs actually depend on may actually come in the form of a powder inside dog food. I mean, they're added as a supplement rather than coming from actual whole foods. That's not natural. Now, looking at dog food like this, it doesn't sound very healthy, does it? So how can we be told that dog food is the only thing we should be feeding our dogs? Well, as mentioned, it often comes down to the claim that dog food is complete and balanced. Now, what does complete and balanced actually mean? It basically means that the dog food is supposed to contain all the nutrients dogs require in the right ratios. Now, an organization called the National Research Council, or the NRC, has put together some nutrient profiles for dogs, which is basically a list of nutrients that they say our dogs require through their diet, and the list includes some or mostly minimum values and some maximum values of those nutrients. In order for a dog food to be labeled as complete and balanced, they will either have to satisfy a similar type of nutrient profiles depending on where in the world the food is produced and sold, or the manufacturer may actually run something called a feeding trial, which is pretty much a whole different topic that I won't go into detail about here. Now, nutrient requirements for dogs wasn't really studied much at all before the invention of dog food, though after the invention of dog food, it was really very necessary. Because let's face it, if a dog is supposed to eat one kind of processed food their whole life, there needs to be some sort of nutrient requirements to that food, right? I mean, if I were to make some cookies out of flour and water, it would make sense that that wouldn't feed a dog for a whole lifetime with all the nutrients that they need, right? And that really seems to have been kind of the whole start of the whole dog food nutrient requirement. Like, what else do we need to add to that cookie or very processed food in order for dogs not to get sick? These kind of nutrient profiles for dogs were basically created for the industry, for the pet food industry, so that dog food manufacturers can label their food as complete and balanced and not have dogs get very ill or very sick from eating that food over time. And with that respect, it's very important as well to note that it's not based on optimal nutrition. They're based on, for instance, studies that look at whether or not a dog will show symptoms of deficiencies or excess of very specific nutrients in certain amounts. So for optimal nutrition, those nutrient profiles might look very different. Actually, there are so many factors that play a role in the nutrient requirements of dogs that one specific profile can't suit everyone and every diet. Nutrients interact with each other. The bioavailability of nutrients differ a lot between different sources of the nutrients, which means basically that the ability of our dogs to actually absorb those nutrients vary a lot depending on where those nutrients actually come from. Plus, some of the nutrient requirements are not even known, they're just estimated. The nutrient profiles are based largely on studies of dogs being fed diets that are not natural. For instance, dogs may be fed purified diets where they add just single nutrients just to test whether or not how much is required of that specific nutrient. However, this is very unnatural because, as mentioned, the actual requirements of specific nutrients depend on so many different factors. And this is also why these nutrient profiles do not apply to whole food. Whole food already comes packaged in the form that nature intended, meaning with the right ratios of nutrients. Of course, dogs do require specific kind of foods, but if we feed the right type of foods to our dogs, we don't really need to think that much about single nutrients. And if we do think about single nutrients, in the sense of, for instance, the nutrient profiles, that can actually become dangerous to our dogs. For instance, when some people feed homemade diets to their dogs, they make it so-called complete and balanced based on the same nutrient profiles, which can be a huge mistake. For instance, people start adding ingredients that are not even natural for dogs to eat, or they even add supplements, so single nutrients in the form of supplements. The danger is that the nutrient profiles are not based on actually feeding whole foods to our dogs. So if we feed a whole food diet and then add a bunch of supplements just to satisfy those profiles, we may completely put our dogs' actual nutrient requirements off balance. By the way, if you enjoy this kind of no BS, give it to you straight kind of videos on all things dogs, then make sure to click that subscribe button and turn on notifications to follow my channel. And remember to follow me on Instagram at VikingIngun. Now, dog food is pretty much the complete opposite of what dogs have been eating for most of their existence on this planet, including the time we have been living with dogs, which could be as much as 30,000 years or more. In nature, dogs would eat whole foods. I mean, makes sense, right? Because they don't know how to cook food themselves. So they would have to eat whole food. And they would eat mostly meat, fresh meat. And that's pretty much the opposite of what most dog food actually is. Now, it's pretty much impossible to know exactly what people fed their dogs about 150 years ago because it would vary from dog owner to dog owner. Though I found an article from the New York Times from 1981, which I thought was pretty interesting because here's some of what it said. Only 35 years ago, the pet food industry did not exist. Dogs lived on leftovers and butchers' excess. In those pre-World War II days, if someone had suggested that as a nation we would spend $4 billion a year to feed our pets, the response might have been a testy, why bother? They can eat table scraps. I think that's pretty powerful. I mean, if the pet food industry hasn't actually been able to create something that's way more healthy for our dogs, then why are so many people feeding dog food to their dogs? And there's another thing that this article mentioned that I want to share with you as well. The campaign against leftovers has been successful. Today, more than 60% of the pets in the United States eat commercial food. The late 1960s and early 70s marked the pet food boom, a veritable mush rush as major soup companies, Campbell, Lipton, cereal manufacturers, Post, General Foods, vied with candy companies, Mars, and dairies to add animal products to what is always referred to in this context as their human line. The thing is, the dog food industry is a huge industry, but that doesn't mean we should be feeding our dogs dog food. Complete and balanced does not mean optimal nutrition. And especially when seeing how so many dogs out there have all sorts of health problems, anything from itchy skin, allergies, diarrhea, other digestive issues, even arthritis or even cancer, plus that they live years shorter than their potential age. It really doesn't seem like the invention of dog food has been the best for our dog's health. It may be practical, but at the expense of our dog's health? Now, a lot of people report amazing health benefits when switching from a commercial diet to a natural, real food diet for dogs. And I personally think it makes a lot of sense for dogs to actually eat real food. Now, there is not one specific diet for dogs, though there are of course foods that are healthier for our dogs than others. And of course, if we're talking about table scraps, going back to feeding table scraps to our dogs may be a good idea, though that really depends on what you're eating as well. Basically, if we want to go back to what's natural for our dogs and actually feed real food rather than processed commercial dog food, then there are a few things we should keep in mind when it comes to specifically what to feed our dogs. For instance, even though we don't have a nutrient requirement list to look at, it is important to make sure our dogs get enough nutrients. And to do that, it's a good idea to focus on nutrient-dense foods. However, those nutrients also need to be bioavailable, which means that our dogs can digest and actually absorb and make use of those nutrients. A lot of nutrients from plant foods may simply not be bioavailable enough for our dogs, and also may not contain enough of certain nutrients that our dogs need, or may completely lack some of them as well. So focusing on nutrient-dense, bioavailable foods, a diet like this would mainly consist of animal products like meat, raw meaty bones, and organ meat. Those are the foods that are most bioavailable and nutrient-dense for our dogs. It's basically what our dogs are designed to eat in nature, and that's also the type of foods that they're most attracted to. They find it delicious. Now, there are different ways to feed a diet like this to dogs, and some people make it super complicated, like including 20 plus ingredients in just a single meal. However, I truly believe that simple is often better. And it's important to make sure you don't add ingredients that don't even make sense for dogs to eat, and that may actually make other foods less nutritious. Now, it is a good idea to vary the protein sources within your dog's diet, though it's not necessary to include 10-15 ingredients in one single meal. Now, if you'd like to know more specifically how to put together a healthy, nutritious, and delicious real food diet for dogs in a simple way, then you should check out the Viking Dog Diet System. It's a system that's based on science that shows you step by step how to put together a real food diet for dogs. It includes meal examples and even how to transition your dog to such a diet. If you'd like to know more and even see some stories of dogs whose lives completely transformed due to their owner's decision to feed a natural diet, then you should head over to vikingdogdiet.com right now. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and if so, then give it a thumbs up and make sure to share it so that we can help more dogs out there be as healthy, happy, and live as long as possible. Give your beautiful dog a hug for me, and I'll see you next time. Bye.